On July 5th, 2018, 23-year-old Angela Hernandez started the 16-hour drive from Portland, Oregon to Lancaster, California. She was driving alone and heading down to visit with her older sister. Her drive was going to be a beautiful one, right down Highway 1 with views of the coastline and driving through areas like Big Sur, Carmel, and San Francisco. Angela was very close to her family and kept in touch regularly with everyone, and this trip was no exception. About 10 hours after she left home, Angela decided to pull off for the night and find a place to park and get some sleep. She parked her Jeep Patriot behind a Safeway grocery store near Half Moon Bay, California, texted her sister to let her know where she was and that she was going to get some sleep, before continuing her journey the next day. The next morning, Angela woke up, drove to a gas station in Carmel to fill up, and headed on her way to her sister's. Angela would never make it there. She wasn't answering her phone, responding to text messages, or posting on social media. Angela had vanished into thin air. Where was Angela Hernandez? Hello, and welcome to a bonus episode of the Where Are They podcast. And an episode that has been solved. But I'm not giving any spoilers away except to say this case does have a resolution in the end. Angela Hernandez was like many 23-year-olds in 2018. She was close to her family and fairly active on social media. In July of 2018, she was planning to drive her 2011 white Jeep Patriot from her home in Portland, Oregon, down to Lancaster, California, a Los Angeles suburb. On July 5th, she packed up her car and started heading south. She made it down near Half Moon Bay, California, and found a Safeway grocery store and decided to park there for the night. She planned to get some sleep in her car and then continue her journey the next morning. She texted her sister to let her know her plans and where she was staying that night, and then she went to sleep. The next morning, Angela woke up and drove to a gas station in Carmel. From there, she headed to Highway 1 and started the beautiful scenic drive south. The sun was shining and all seemed right with the world. A little while later, Angela's family starts texting her, checking in, but they don't receive any responses. They start calling and they're met with voicemail greetings each time. Something didn't seem right. But they still hoped she was just continuing her drive. By nightfall, the family is trying to reach Angela any way that they can. They're calling, texting, and trying social media, but they are met with complete silence. Why wasn't Angela answering them? That night, when they still couldn't reach Angela and she didn't show up in Lancaster as planned, they reported Angela missing. Police start looking into the case right away, which is a blessing. They were able to ping her cell phone near Davenport, California. That looked like the last place her phone had pinged. And looking at the map, it looks like Davenport is just an hour or so south of Half Moon Bay, straight down Highway 1, right along the coastline. First, in covering so many missing person cases, a kudos to the police in that area that quickly were able to ping her phone and start things moving in the search for Angela Hernandez. So many cases I cover in which this process can take weeks or months, especially when dealing with a missing adult. Law enforcement begins organizing searches in the area, but they don't find anything. No clues. Both Angela and her Jeep Patriot are missing. Nothing seems to make sense. So many people begin worrying, did something happen while she was parked at the Safeway? Did she encounter someone or did someone see her? It was said that that area used to have a pretty big homeless encampment there right behind the store, but owners had recently changed that and they were supposedly no longer there. But police wondered if someone had seen Angela or followed her when she left Safeway. They finally do find a clue when they discover Angela on CCTV at a gas station in Carmel. Carmel is probably another hour south of Davenport, where her phone pinged, and about 2 hours south of where she had stayed the night. Angela's family drives in from different areas to help search, even bringing a drone to help them look over the rocky edges of Highway 1. And by Tuesday, they have even scrambled together some reward money, $10,000, and they put out public pleas for help in finding Angela. It doesn't make any sense that she would have taken off or run off on her own. But they did wonder if she met someone along her drive and something bad happened. To make matters worse for the family, Angela had an older brother that had gone missing several years ago. For the family, this was a horrible reminder of that time, and that situation did not have a happy ending. Her brother was eventually found deceased. So you can imagine the horror that the family was going through, having to live through this all over again. Authorities continued searching and brought in helicopters to even help. The family hit the nearby towns and neighborhoods and put up missing posters and flyers everywhere they could. As they approached the 1 week mark with still no clues as to Angela's whereabouts or her Jeep, the family feared the worst. A search party was organized for Saturday, July 14th. A bunch of family members had come to town, and anxiety over the situation was growing every day. Meanwhile, Chad and Chelsea Moore, a young couple that enjoys surfing in the outdoors, they call themselves adventurers, were camping in Big Sur. They had planned to go surfing that afternoon, but the waves weren't great and they decided to take a hike down the beach instead. Their hike led them to a rocky cliff area, an area difficult to get to. When they noticed something odd in the sand, Chad realized it was a car bumper. And it certainly looked out of place, so they went to check it out further. It was mangled up quite a bit, and something stopped them in their tracks. Just around the bend of the rocks and boulders, they saw a Jeep. It was half submerged in water. It was in bad shape. But Chad could tell it was a newer model, not something that belonged there. It looked out of place. They made their way over to the vehicle and started collecting items that they found around it and even taking off the license plate. They wanted to take the items to the local police department and let them know what they found and where it was. High tide was starting to creep in around 6:15 p.m., and the couple decided to take a different way out of the hidden spot that they had found. And as they were leaving, they heard someone and froze. A woman. They heard a woman yelling for help. Chelsea and Chad had found Angela Hernandez. They rushed over to her and noted that she, quote, looked like hell, end quote, which I can totally imagine. Chad decided to stay with Angela while Chelsea went back to the campground to call for help. Angela was severely injured. When Chelsea made it back to the campground, she immediately saw a missing person flyer and realized that the girl they found had been stuck there for a full week. From the campground, she called 911. Here is a clip from that call.
Hi, so you saw a vehicle go off the roadway? about access, like you can only get down there by ropes, and we came across a car. And it looked pretty fresh, but it was hard to tell.
What kind of car was it?
We kept hiking. What?
What kind of car was it?
A Jeep with Oregon plates.
White Jeep with Oregon plates?
Yeah.
Okay. So just north of there, about a quarter mile north of that location, it was off the roadway. Did you see if anybody was in the vehicle?
There's no one in the vehicle, but we found a person like a quarter mile away, and they were calling for help, and we heard them, and we found them in the rocks.
No. Okay. Hold on. I'm trying to locate a better location.
And it was her car.
Okay. Hold on. Do you know what the nearest mile marker there is? Can you ask the female what the nearest real mile marker there is?
Do you know the nearest mile marker? We're right at the Yeah, we're right at the intersection of Nacimiento Ferguson Road and Highway 1. We're like right there.
Highway 1 and Nacimiento Ferguson?
Yes, that's where the campground is that we're at, using the phone.
Okay, so you said you located a person? What was the person? Where's the person at now?
She's down on the beach, and there's no way to really get her up.
What was the name of the beach?
Yeah, if you sent... The beach doesn't have a name. It's just like a remote beach below the campground that doesn't have access, but we made our way down there because we're adventurers. And she made her way down there because she crashed her car.
Okay, so the beach is not accessible by road, right? You said you had to use ropes to get down there?
Yeah, it's really, really steep, which is why she's in really bad shape. It's like a cliff. She drove up a cliff, and we found her.
About how far down from the cliff is she?
At the bottom? I mean,
I'm sorry. I'm trying to ask, determine the size. Do you know, is it like 100 feet, 200 feet?
I would call it 100 feet.
100 feet?
No, more than 100.
Maybe like 200?
Maybe? Depends on where you go down from. I'm not sure where the highway was at the point she went off, like how high up that was, but you can't see it from the beach because it's so steep.
Crews would make it to Angela and get her to the hospital, with everyone stating it was a miracle that she was even alive. Angela was treated for a broken arm and a concussion. She had several bumps and bruises and was pretty banged up. Her tale is one of survival, miracles, and guardian angels. Angela was able to relay her story to authorities and her family, and it's a crazy one. Late that morning, July 6th, Angela had been driving down Highway 1. She was on a stretch of road that was very curvy. In many places, the drop to the ocean below was over 200 feet, and it was all rock and cliff. Angela said she had been startled when a rabbit ran in front of her, and she swerved out of the way, sending her Jeep careening over the cliff. She would say that she didn't remember much from the actual crash and impact, but at some point she came to and realized she had not only crashed, but the water was rising up in her Jeep. She managed to break a window and crawl out of the Jeep, swimming through the rising water to get to the rocks in a small beach. When she finally made it there, she said she must have passed out. A while later, she awoke and the reality of what happened set in. There was no way off of the rocks that she was trapped on. The road above her was 200 feet away. She could maneuver around some of the rocks, but there was really nowhere she could go. Angela said she remembered that she had a bottle of water in her Jeep and tried desperately to get to it, but she couldn't. The next couple of days, again, were a blur to her, and she thinks it was the third day when she heard water dripping. She noticed some mossy rocks and headed over there. The rocks that she had been sitting on and laying on were getting too hot anyway, and she thought the mossy area would cool her down. She made her way there and was delighted to find water dripping off of them. She tasted it and realized that it was fresh water. She had found a piece of broken hose near her Jeep and realized that would be the perfect thing to use for her to drink this water. And when she first got a taste of that fresh water, she said she sat there for probably over an hour, drinking up all the fresh water that she could. Her daily routine was walking around that small area she was stranded on, screaming for help. She would drink as much water as she could, and she would just pray someone would find her. This would continue on for 7 days until Chad and Chelsea did come across her. Authorities were all alerted, her family was contacted, and it was with great happiness that law enforcement called off the planned search that was scheduled for the very next day, that Saturday. Angela had been found. To me, this is almost a real-life story that almost mimics the plot of Castaway. I love sharing stories of missing persons that have been found. It's not always a happy ending, but luckily for the Hernandez family, this was one. Angela's time on Earth was not over yet, and she said she recognizes her survival was a miracle, and she plans to make the most of her life, living every day to the fullest. I also love seeing how law enforcement, family, and the community rallied together right away to help find this girl. Authorities did say that they had passed the area of highway that she crashed off of, but no one had noticed anything out of the ordinary at the time. They had been so close. I do plan on sharing solved episodes every now and then. I do get quite a few requests for them, and I know sometimes it helps to bring hope and some good news since we do cover a lot of tragedy. Again, if you have a case that you would like to hear, solved or unsolved, send me a message at canwefindthem@gmail.com. Thank you all so much for listening to Angela's story. It's a great example of everyone working together and staying strong. And most importantly, a look at that brave battle that Angela Hernandez fought for 7 long days. We will be back next week with another Unsolved Missing Person episode on our regularly scheduled show. And until then, stay safe and hug your loved ones.